Doug.
Hey, Scott. How's it going?
Well, I don't hear any helicopters right now, so that's nice.
Have you heard them recently?
Almost nonstop for the last 3 days.
Is it usually just at night or during the day?
Basically all the time.
Really? Are you guys having lots of protests?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Yeah, we're having some here, but I think, at least for as far as I know, they're mainly in like downtown Raleigh, but I haven't heard much in terms of anything really going on that's bad. Just people, voicing their opinion and stuff like that. The only thing that's come close is we actually went or tried to go out to a restaurant in a little town that's close by here, maybe about a 10-minute drive away. And we get there and the restaurant's closed. And it's according to the website, it should have been open. And it turns out they were closed because this dinky little town, they were going to have some protests, near the town hall or whatever. And simply because they didn't know what was going to happen, they decided to basically shut down pretty much everything in this tiny little town. It was kind of amusing.
Hey, Doug, it's Christian.
Hey, Christian.
Yeah, I think the town next to mine is actually having a protest today, I believe.
Yeah.
All right.
Hey, John.
Good morning.
How you doing? Yeah.
This COVID thing is not the fun time.
Yeah. Interesting. It's taken a while for people's mic to be turned on. Hey, Scott, just out of curiosity, do you have any topics for the SDK call today?
No, we've been pretty quiet. After 2.0, we're just kind of taking a breather.
Okay. Actually, I guess I should delete the TypeScript repo like I said I would. All right. Matthias, are you there? Matthias? Matthias. Maybe one of the days I'll get it right. What about Tommy?
Hey.
It still amazes me, Tommy, every week that you show up, given the time zone difference. All right. Hey, Thomas.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hello.
Cool.
And Matthias? Matthias? Still not there. We may have a very low attendance today.
We at Knative canceled our meetings this week.
Yeah. Hey, Eric.
Good morning.
How you doing?
Doing just fine. I have a lot
That's
to be grateful for.
Yep.
How about yourself?
Hi guys.
Good. Pretty good. Who is that, Remy?
Yeah, you are
Hello.
right on my line. So
Yeah.
right on time.
All right, and Christoph.
Hi.
Hello. And Mr. No, wait. Lance, are you there?
Hello, I'm here.
Hello. Da. I feel like I'm
Hi,
missing
Doug. This is
something.
Matthias.
Hey,
I'm
there you
audible
are.
now.
Yay, gotcha.
Just a problem to unmute.
Not a problem. Jim, are you there?
Yes.
All right, and Clemens.
Yes, I am.
Hello, he's not happy. All right,
Well, yeah.
Vinay,
Hey, Doug. Good morning.
good morning. All right, missing anybody? I don't think so. Oh, Slinky, you there?
Hello.
Hello. All right, just give a couple more minutes, then we'll get started. We actually don't have a lot on the agenda. So I'm doing it. I'm erasing the TypeScript SDK as we speak. Dun, dun, dun.
Yoo-hoo.
Yes, woohoo. All right, the deed is done. All right, so thank you, Kent. You there, Kent? Actually, I don't see Kent. He lied. Mr. Mark, are you there?
Hey, Doug.
Hey, Mark. Klaus, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hello. All right, one more minute, then we'll get started. Oh, there you are. Hey, Kent.
Hi.
Hello. All right. While we're waiting, if any of you guys have any topics for the SDK meeting, you may want to add it to the agenda, just so people know what might be up. All right, Brian, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Hello. All right, 3 after. Let's go and get started. I think I got everybody on the agenda. And 19. All right, cool. Okay, no AIs to talk about. Community time. Anything from the community people want to bring up that's not on the agenda? All right. No update on the SIG stuff yet, so we can skip that. SDK subgroup, we do have a call scheduled after this one. As of right now, there's nothing on the agenda. So as I just said, if you have any topics, please add it. Otherwise, you may have a very, very short call, which may not be a bad thing. Let's see, I don't see anybody from the workflow group to give an update. Let me just double check. Nope, I don't see anybody. Okay, so I guess we'll skip that. And before we jump into PRs and stuff, are there any other topics people can think of that I should have added to the agenda? Okay, cool. In that case, Slinky, you're up first with this JSON streaming proposal. I did introduce it last week, so everybody should have known about it and looked at it. But is there anything you would like to draw people's attention to?
So as somebody already warned me when I was doing the HP multi-part proposal, yes, I have to be honest, multi-part is not so trivial to implement in every HP framework out there, because the real problem is that most HP frameworks, libraries, does the assumption that when you use multi-part on HP, you use multipart only in the form data version. So implementing the HTTP multipart proposal could be effectively a problem for some libraries out there. The JSON streaming was the other idea, and this one it's definitely trivial to implement because it's basically a byte scanning. You take your byte stream, you scan the stream until a precise character, and then you take all the bytes that you read before, and you parse those bytes as a cloud event JSON, as a JSON cloud event. So that's more or less the idea. The discussion, there was some discussion around which character should we use to delimit, and I decided to follow the RFC 7464 because because the RS character, it's a character that inside a string needs to be escaped. And new line, it could be a problem because when you send the JSON delimited by a new line, you are assuming that the JSON is never pretty printed. While in the case of RSLF, you don't have such problem because you just scan your byte stream, and when you read an RS, you trim the bytes, and then you parse that as a JSON.
Okay. Anything else you want to say before I open it up for questions? Okay, I guess not. And so any questions, comments?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
So I've implemented something that, or struggled to implement something that looks somewhat like this, and that is XMPP. And XMPP is effectively this picture, but with XML. And what's hard about XMPP, and that also limits the number of implementations of XMPP, is that you need to run an XML parser to see where your boundaries are, or at least you need to go and pre-parse the stream. Of course, you've now chosen something. You've chosen an indicator that is not valid in JSON, so that kind of makes that moot. But still, you need to go and basically parse the stream first, and then you need to go and throw that into JSON. And then it's not clear whether there's not an escape situation where you might go in and encounter this. But what strikes me when I look at this is that you're now introducing a little protocol that is a framing protocol effectively for JSON, which someone needs to go and implement. While there is, even to the browser in most frameworks, a ready-made HTTP compatible implementation of a little framing protocol that allows you to pass on text frames, and that's WebSockets. Because WebSockets effectively allows you to do what you do here, and that is, negotiate a little channel that gives you a stream, and then you can demand that you send text frames over WebSockets, and with text frames over WebSockets, you can make a never-ending stream of events, and that's something that is supported everywhere without extra coding.
Well, that's really not what I meant to do here, honestly.
Okay, so what's the goal?
I mean, the goal here for me is just send multiple events in the same envelope without paying the price to take a huge JSON, buffer all the JSON, and then from that big JSON array, take the single events.
So you're just objecting to the fact that you need to have an array?
I'm objecting to the fact that the way we have now to send multiple events in the same envelope requires to have a JSON array.
Okay.
And you need
why is that a problem?
Well, one big problem with that is that you need to know how many elements are going to be in that array because you need to set the content size. So
No, you don't, because you can use transfer encoding chunked, and then you don't need to know the size at all.
But you still need to buffer the whole body before starting parsing it.
No, you don't.
Because
There are plenty of JSON reader implementations which allow you to make progress against the stream, and then basically know exactly when you have an object captured, and then you turn that into. So I mean, progressive reading of JSON is something that is available in a bunch of stacks. You don't need to read the whole thing back to the final closing square bracket to be able to process that stream. That's not necessary. So with the JSON batching model that we have today, you can go and start a JSON reader object. For instance, we have a .NET implementation of that, and there is a Java implementation of that, and there's tons of streaming JSON parsers, and they will go and tell you effectively once you have an object, and then you go and take that object and then you turn it into a cloud event. And with transfer coding chunked, you just basically do what you do here, but in a form that is embedded in HTTP per se. If you really want to have an endless stream and you want to make that efficient, and you want to make that super easy to handle, then WebSockets is effectively the upgrade path. But you can use streaming parsing with JSON, no problem.
I decided to take Clemens up on his statement and check the Go stuff, and it does seem like there is something like that. Now, whether I don't know if this thing would die or not if that closing bracket is never seen, but it does seem like it's similar to what he's describing. I'm just curious, Francesco, if something like this would not work for you.
Sorry, can you repeat the last sentence?
I'm just wondering if the current batch format would not work for you. Because I just picked Go as an example, right? It looks like Go does support the idea of streaming JSON parser, and it doesn't look like it. I mean, assuming it doesn't have to read in the whole thing, but I don't know for sure.
So if I recall correctly, this decoder works it works for new line separated streams.
Oh, non-pretty printed.
I think no, it works with pre-printed, but to work with pre-printed, it keeps inside the state of the parsing. Okay, so it's a stateful parser. This decoder is a stateful parser that inside keeps the state of the parsing in order to know if a new line is the end of a JSON or if the new line is just a continuation of the stream. Sorry, a new object.
Can you elaborate a little on that? Because it seems to me that any parser is going to have some sort of state to know when it reaches the end, right? The end of that particular JSON chunk. So, I mean, I think I'm just not missing. I think I'm missing something here.
What I mean is that the JSON decoder inside this JSON decoder you're looking at, if I recall correctly, it's able to read the new line separated JSONs. Okay, and in order to do that, it has an internal state to know if it's still reading a JSON object or a JSON value, or if the new line is effectively the end of the latest JSON value.
Okay, but why is that a problem?
No, it's not a problem. It's not a problem. I'm just no, that was specific to the discussion new line versus RS chart.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
no,
that was just
okay. No, I was focusing back on Clemens' comment on his assertion that we don't need this and we can just use the batch stuff, and you can just pass it into this decoder as opposed to reading it all at once. I was just focusing on that bit. Because Clemens, I think you're basically asserting we don't need this, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah. So I'm effectively when you have a streaming parser, then you know when you read the first element that if that's an array, then or if that's an open bracket, then the streaming parser will tell you that you're about to encounter an array. That's when you switch into your batch streaming mode, and then you basically just go and read. You know that there's going to be an object coming, so you go and effectively read the object, and then you spew out the object to whoever is calling you, and then you read the next object, then you need the next object, and the HTTP infrastructure, if that understands transfer encoding chunked, which means it supports streaming, will present that entity body as a stream to you, which means you can basically just go and stream over that thing. Like most HTTP infrastructures that are aware of stream transfers, which means chunked encoding, will have an option to implement it that way. So I think this is an attempt to overcome a particular behavior of a parser, but with the stream parser, the batch format just works.
Okay, I'm gonna give it a try.
Okay, I think that'd be good. Okay, any other questions or comments? Oh, Jem, your hand's up.
So I like batching, and this is not particularly a comment on this exact spec or proposal, but I still have concerns when we batch stuff about how endpoints are meant to process them, and I'm not sure if that needs to be a statement in these types of specs. So by that I mean, if somebody sends me a batch of events, and as I go through them, I find one that's corrupt, does that mean the whole batch is corrupt? You know, how am I, you know, from an HTTP perspective, am I giving a status for the batch, or, you know, I'm never quite sure how we would define that, or I don't know that we have defined that.
I don't think we have.
Yeah.
I don't think we've, because that's, so what we do here with this in the HTTP spec, in particular, the HTTP spec only binds the, that's why we have that split, right? We have a split where we have an HTTP binding, and all that does is bind a cloud event to the HTTP protocol message. And that is this. And then we have the webhook spec. So this is relationship to HTTP. I think we actually said that, if you go up on top.
Oh, yeah.
Relation to HTTP. Does not prescribe rules constraining the user handling of specific HTTP methods, and also so with that, status codes are just illustrations. So this is effectively just saying how do you bind the cloud event to the HTTP message per se, and then we have this complementary webhook spec which says how are you delivering one event to or an event or a set of events to another party. So that's why we're defining the usage of post.
Yeah.
But that spec is, I'm not sure whether we actually have how we're handling batches in that spec defined. That's in the, I don't think the webhook spec says anything about this because we kept that neutral to cloud events.
Yeah, and I get that. I think if I was wearing an SDK developer hat, I'm not sure how I would implement, you know, a batch or a stream. Yeah, because, and I'm also not sure where we would define the handling characteristics. So
that is the exact same question I asked about maybe 6 months ago, and that is why the Go SDK doesn't implement batch.
Yeah,
So hold that thought, Clemens, because Slinky's hands up. Go ahead, Francesco.
Yeah, so as a proposal to handle the failures, the interface to get more to get more events is like a stream where every time you call next, you get or an event or a failure. But yeah, the problem still remains. What needs to be done if there is a failure in the middle? So.
Yeah, but it seems like the processing of failures is something that's
yeah,
would be done it's separate PR, right? I mean,
I know. I think it's just outside the spec. I mean, here we are just as Clemens said. I think and I think it's one of the biggest strengths of the spec is that we are just saying how to smash events inside an HTTP envelope. We are not saying how to handle them.
Right.
And I think we shouldn't.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you're going to do some investigation, and then we can revisit this one, right?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on this one before we move on? All right. Thank you, everybody. Jem, protobuf.
Yes.
What would you like to say about that one?
So I incorporated the comments and feedback from last week. I hope I've covered everything that everybody was commenting on. There's still one big open item to me that somebody did actually comment on a PR around my choice of media type. And I think I'm in a bit of a no-win situation there because absent a defined media type, I feel that we just have to pick one, and I'm not quite sure which one we should pick. There seem to be, if we look at Spring, for instance, I think they use application x-protobuf like I'd originally chosen. The other one is obviously application/protobuf. I don't know if we can support more than one. That seems a bit of a problem. But that I think is I think this is basically in a state where, you know, people should look at it and go, yeah, we can pull it into the current version or not. Absent the conversation on media type.
So Slinky had a comment in the chat saying application/cloud events plus protobuf would be consistent with JSON and Avro. Anybody quick comment on that?
That seems like a good reason to use that one.
And also, if you use application/protobuf, the SDK parser could, could break because maybe because it doesn't know if it's protobuf. I mean, if it's a cloud events protobuf or not, because maybe some other, for example, Spring uses the same content type.
So
Jem, did we lose you?
Oh, sorry, I was talking on mute. Yeah, I think in my current spec, I use application/cloud events plus x-protobuf. So that's the one that's in play today, but I'm quite happy to change that.
Okay, I think Thomas, your hand is up next.
Yep. It actually was me making a comment about the media type. Am I right that this is only about the data inside the cloud event? It's not about the whole event itself, right?
No, so this is an event format. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So when it's a structured mode transmission, you would use cloud events plus protobuf, and that indicates that it's a structured protobuf cloud event payload. In a binary mode, then we could be sending a binary payload over HTTP. So the headers would be as per the HTTP binding spec, And the payload there would just be application/protobuf, yeah, because we don't really care about the payload encoding.
So did I actually mix that up? Because I thought that this is about only about the type or the media type of the payload itself.
Well, I mean, it's the subtlety here is the content type designation when it's a structured cloud event using a protobuf format. Yeah, so that's the subtlety. But to keep everything consistent, application/protobuf or application/cloud events plus protobuf would seem to be, as you say, in line with Avro. So, although I did, and I hate to throw Avro under the bus, but I looked at the Avro spec, and their HTTP requires you to use binary/Avro or something. So we're sort of not following the Avro spec there, I don't believe.
Okay. Any other? Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm done. Sorry.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Ryan, did you say what you want to say because your hand was up? I assume maybe it was just for the same.
Yeah, I just said it in chat, so I didn't waste everyone's time.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you're going to be changing this to something different. Are there other things in here that are worthy of discussion, or is that the only thing that's outstanding?
Is that a question to me or the group?
That's well, first for you, but then I'll ask the group at large if they're okay with the general direction.
I don't believe there's anything else. As I say, I believe all the other commentary has been included, or addressed rather.
Okay. So does anybody on the call have any concerns or questions about the direction this is going? Because if this is the last change, then hopefully maybe next week we can actually do a formal approval or vote on it. Since no one's speaking up, Jem, where is Evan on this? Because I know he's had lots of comments. And I haven't had a chance to actually read his comments. Is he okay with this, you think?
I'll ping him directly. I think what's interesting is that there was an issue opened which I'd completely blanked on. Somebody had opened an issue a while ago about protobuf binding. And as I went through some of the commentary in that, it seemed eerily in line with what I'd actually ended up proposing. So my hope is that this will address that issue as well.
That'd be good. Cool. All right. Any last questions or comments then? Otherwise, we'll assume that, well, actually, when was the last time you made a change to this?
About 5 minutes before this call.
And was that just because of this media type?
No, it was just I hadn't put the reference to the spec in the README. So
when was the last substantial change you made?
Last week, I believe.
That's what I thought. Because technically, to me, these are syntactical things. I don't know, maybe this is more than syntactical. I'm just wondering whether people want to try to approve it today or not. Does anybody have any opinion one way or the other? I don't think it's like urgent, but I don't necessarily want to wait if we don't have to.
I don't think there's any rush, but I mean, I think, as you say, given Evan's commentary, I think it would be useful just to at least sort of see if he's comfortable with it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yep. That's a good point. I forgot about Evan, even though I mentioned it. Okay. So let's plan on hopefully approving this one next week with this one media type change. And thank you, Brian. And you'll double check with Evan to make sure he's okay with it as a sanity check. All right. Cool. Thank you, everybody. All right. Klaus.
Yes.
On this one.
Yep.
You want to refresh everybody's memory about this one? Because I think you just briefly introduced it last week.
Okay, so I added this as I remembered it was in one of the first drafts we had in the Google Doc for discovery. I think that was called source pattern, and then I did some research how OpenAPI, Async API, and so on are doing these things, and at that point, I then ran into this RFC I'm referencing here, this 6570, and they call it template. So that's why I call the attribute also source template. It's about explaining how a source attribute would be created by the producer. So as we now have this, I think Doug introduced this service here in this pull request. It's still under event provider, but I think this will then change once the transition to this service notion is complete. So there you describe group of sources, and in many cases we introduced the service because in not all cases you could really enumerate all sources, so it would make sense to do it. So and instead here have a template how those sources will be created. I mean, I think the example is quite clear. That is a very simple example. So the templating reference RFC here is defining several levels of templates, how they call it. And that's the example is, for example, just a level 1 template. So that is one of the things I also put into the comments, reacting to some questions from Doug. One of the things I could imagine we could restrict here is that we restrict it to a certain level of templates, or just recommend to only use level 1 templates or things like this. Apart from that, in OpenAPI, there is also a way to more closely define those variables in the expression. But I think the usage of those templates is different there, as it's describing how API consumer would fill in those values. In our cases, it's more for documentation purposes. So you learn how the source field will be populated by the producer. So so I don't know if it's necessary to introduce a complex way of more formally defining those variables. On the other hand, there are those JSON schema fields like description, examples, and might be nice to have this in addition. So that's just what I wrote just, I think, about an hour ago, yes.
Yeah. Let's go back over here. All right. Any questions for Klaus? Okay, I guess I have a question, not necessarily for Klaus, but anybody who's actually planning on either doing an SDK or maybe possibly looking to incorporate the spec into their work, like for example, the Knative folks on the call. Do you guys see this field being useful at all? Especially, I guess, in terms of automation.
Yeah, this seems like a really nice way to stitch together the subject and source. Although okay. I wonder if it's, more complicated because I guess, how does this relate exactly to source, subject, and type?
Yeah, so first of all, this one is just for source, but it's true. It could also, you could also have something like this for subject. One more thing I wonder about is that those templates are construction rules, basically. They are not really useful for creating parsing rules. So I wonder if it could also be helpful to have some description how you would parse such a source field to get out certain values again. And
see, that's interesting you said that, because I actually assumed this was for parsing.
Yes, so that's also what I was looking for, to be honest. And then in the RFC here, I read some comment that this is only possible in certain cases where those variables, the values represented by those variables do not contain reserved characters like the slash, for example. So that's possible, I suppose, with level 1 templates, because there this is the case. But with more sophisticated templates, you lose this.
Yeah.
And in general, they say it's not really intended for that kind of use, to describe how it's parsed. It's really more a construction rule. So that's why if we have something more suitable for this case, that could also be an alternative.
I have a dumb idea.
Mhm.
What if we allowed URI templates in source and subject? And didn't introduce a new field, but extended the existing fields that are currently URI refs.
Subject is a string, is it?
Yes.
Subject. Oh, sorry. No, subject. I thought it's a relative URI.
No.
Well, wait a minute, though. Are you talking about in the actual cloud event itself, or in the metadata you get back from the discovery?
I want to put it in the. I want to put it in the event.
Yeah,
So you want every event to have the template?
Yep.
Interesting. What's the advantage of that? Just so you don't have to use, you don't have to query the discovery endpoint first?
How do you discover the discovery endpoint?
Well, that's a different problem.
Yeah, that's a different problem.
Because I mean, it's interesting, Scott, to say you want every cloud event to be sort of self-describing, because I think that's kind of where you're headed, and that's an interesting prospect. But then it almost removes. Well, I don't say it removes the need for the discovery, but it lessens its usefulness a little.
Yeah, I guess I'm not. I'm sorry, I was misunderstanding the original proposal. What I'm hoping for is a way to understand how to basically construct the URI for the resource that's emitting the event from the payload of the event itself. So like, how do you combine source, subject, ID, and type, potentially other things, into the full location of the emitter?
Yeah, the emitter may be some MCU that sits inside of a vehicle on a CAN bus, which means you can't reach it.
But that's fine for the special case, but like, I have some appliance on the internet somewhere and it does have an absolute URI, but I need to know it's like UID and some other things and maybe a special domain.
But just look at any Kubernetes cluster, right? Most of the stuff that sits inside of a Kubernetes cluster is not reachable. It can communicate to the outside, but it can't, like, you have to run through a bunch of hoops to even make stuff inside of a container discoverable, and then it's not necessarily addressable. So there might be thousands of sources that exist inside of a Kubernetes cluster which want to go and emit stuff, but of those, only a minuscule portion will have addressable endpoints.
Well, that's not exactly true. If you're the administrator of the cluster, you could get a URI that points you to the exact pod that's emitting the event that you're asking about. And if you had some mapping,
but there's something running inside of that container, and the workload also wants to go and spew events. And then you need to go and construct a path for how you can go and get that workload piece from the outset. So I'm not talking about the Kubernetes control plane. I'm talking about the workloads that run inside of it.
Yeah,
because those will emit events. So I think it's actually much more common for stuff to be not reachable from the outset than or from whoever gets the event, than for that stuff to be reachable. I think that's actually the corner case.
So, Scott, can I ask a question though? Because I'm not 100% clear I understand what you're asking for. Because so let me ask it this way: are you talking about a different topic? It sounds like you're asking for something that's sort of outside the scope of what Klaus is proposing here.
Yeah, I think I am. But okay. I think it would use the same or a similar solution.
So, okay, yeah, I think I understand that. But I do feel like you're asking for a different set of features, or a different feature.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, that's fine. It's really opening up an issue to track it, though, to have a discussion. So go ahead, Klaus.
So I think you could use a template like this to generate producer coding, but not really consumer coding, at least not in all cases.
So, okay, so Klaus, you said that the exact RFC that you reference here may not be the best one for parsing. And the way I interpreted it, yeah, and the way I interpret that statement is, at some point in the future, if we adopt this PR, we may want to look at a different RFC or some other mechanism, but to me, the high order bit is, do we want to have some sort of URI template here at all? And it may not be the greatest for parsing, but at least it's something to get us started down that path, and we can do more thinking about whether they want to change it they want to use a different template language at all. But I think we have to ask ourselves, do we want this URI template at all, or source template at all?
So one more thing where it might be useful is if you want to create a subscription. So if you know how the source is constructed, you might also be able to create better wildcard subscriptions.
Interesting. Ryan, your hand's up.
Yeah, one thing that we've run into, and this might be an edge case, is there are some cases where the producer actually doesn't know what the URL, what the URI should be, and it actually needs some out-of-band information for how to construct it. And I could see this being used in that context as well.
Yeah, that's actually, we have similar cases, at least for some segments, where then maybe the bus or something later on in the chain might fill it in.
Ryan, I'm sure I understand that. You're saying that normally when we talk about the discovery stuff, we're talking about the discovery stuff being useful for the receiver of the events. And you're saying that no, actually the producer itself could use the discovery information to know how to formulate the outgoing message itself, right?
Potentially, yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I just want to make sure I understood. Okay. Okay, so let me ask the high order question of the group. What do people think about the idea in general of some sort of URI template for source template being added to the spec? Does anybody have an objection to heading down that path? Okay. What do people think about starting off with this RFC, and then if later on we find something better, we can switch? It just means we may need to add some text at some point that says this is fine, but at some point, we may need to add text that says this works in general. However, the restriction is you don't want to make sure that your variable values don't include characters that make it impossible to parse. Like a slash would be very bad here.
Can I?
Yeah.
Can I ask something? I don't get who should implement the source. I mean, who should be able to read the template and fill the templates with the values? It's the discovery server should be able to do that kind of operation.
Klaus, you want to answer that?
If I understood correctly.
So yes, that's the discovery server, or I think here in the text is also called the producer, would hand out that information when you use the discovery API. That was my understanding.
And my question is, do we really need the RFC 7570? Or can we use something simpler? Because I had some experience in past with that, and it's kind of complex as an RFC.
Yeah, so I was suggesting to maybe restrict or recommend at least only to use the level 1 templates from that RFC. That would, I think, reduce the complexity considerably.
Okay.
And yeah.
In that case, I would even look. Because yeah, I tried some time ago to implement that, and it's really, when you start expanding the expansion.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah,
the whole RFC is really complex, and it has, you can do strange things with it.
Yeah, and I think most of them are not useful for us.
Yes, that's true. I mean, my starting point was really looking at an open API and async API here. And they, at least open API, they have references to this RFC also in their specification.
Yeah, that's exactly when I had problems, because the OpenAPI 2 has some all the expansions to support all the kind of expansions in the templates. It starts to be complex. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I would love to keep that pretty simple.
So Klaus, it sounds like you do want to add some additional text. Sorry.
Yes.
So you want to add some additional text, but do you want to do that before we consider adopting the PR, or do you want to do that in a follow-on PR and try to get this in today? It's up to you.
I'm not in a rush. I mean, for me, it's
okay. That's fine. Okay, we can wait then. So I'm not, just to make that perfectly clear, no one on the call has any objection with heading down this path, and that once Klaus adds the additional text that says we're going to limit ourselves to level 1, potentially add some text that says, be warned, you know, variable values that make it difficult to parse, like slashes in this case, are not recommended, whatever he wants to add there. If we add those texts, everybody's basically okay with that general direction? Okay, cool. All right, thank you, Klaus. Any last questions or comments on that before we move on? Okay. Clemens, is there anything to talk about with your registry proposal? Because I don't think you made any changes since last time.
I have not made any changes because there is still very valuable feedback coming in, and I'm very happy about the level of engagement. So I didn't want to disturb the document while people are still commenting. But yeah, I'm gonna do edits for next week.
Okay.
I want to do some edits for this week, but I also have some other specs to write, so I just want to let that sit there for because I also but I think I have enough now to go and do one pass to incorporate all the feedback.
All right, cool. Does anybody have any questions for Clemens? All right, cool. In that case, yep, thank you, Clemens. I wanted to have a slightly different discussion since we don't have any PRs left to talk about. I wanted to talk a little bit about how people actually see using this stuff. And I think this goes to something, Klaus, you and I talked about offline a while ago, which is, do we need use cases or something along those lines to help frame the discussion and make sure we're all heading in the same direction in terms of what is the problem we're trying to solve? And just to get the ball rolling here, I'm not sure how useful this is, but I was just thinking last night of how I would actually use the specification in a more concrete example. And I thought, okay, let's say GitHub actually supported the spec, right? So I thought, okay, maybe I do a curl to github.com/services. I get back this information. It seemed about right to me in the sense that, okay, let's say they have a subscribe endpoint that I'm going to send my request to. Using Klaus's template stuff, I can say, okay, this is how the, actually, this may not be right. So Klaus, you had source template at the outermost level.
Yes. So
should it be associated with type?
I thought it would be associated with service as it's representing a group of sources. That was my understanding. But
okay, then I'm wondering, so then I think what I wrote here is wrong because this part doesn't make any sense to me unless you're talking about a particular type of event that's related to pull requests.
That's true. Interesting case for this data model, or for the understanding of service. Yep.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, does that mean that we need maybe a higher level one, but something that can be overridden down here? Or do you think this goes away up here and it only appears down here?
That depends again if you see this as just a denormalized way of representing this connection, this relation between services and types, or if types are really children of services in data model view. So,
sorry, I had a typo here and it's bugging me.
Because it would mean that different services emitting the same event type would still use different type definitions probably. Because the source template might vary.
Yeah. Okay, so that's something we need to think about. But does everybody, aside from that potential error here, does this look right to people in terms of what you might get back from GitHub? And assuming there's only 3 types of events, and it's all about pull requests. Because if that's right, then my assumption was, okay, I'm going to do a create, a subscribe, and this is using the subscription spec at that point. And I think the endpoint is I don't think it's defined yet in the spec, but I took a guess and said, okay, let's say /create, passing in the required information, which is an ID, what protocol they want to do the subscription under, and where the sync is. And I think the exact same information comes back if it gets accepted. is this the flow? And is this, in essence, the primary use case that you guys are envisioning for how these two specs are meant to be used? No comment? Not even a yes? Because to me, this is an important point, because I feel like I can explain the use cases for cloud events, right? I can explain why it's needed, who's going to use it, how it makes your life easier. And I want to be able to get to that same point here with this. And I feel like this is a stepping stone in that direction, but I'm not, at least in my head, I don't feel like I'm there yet, other than very abstractly this use case. But I don't know if this is what everybody else thinks is the killer use case.
I think this is about right.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the overall shape is right. I think there are some details that might change, but yeah.
Okay. And so if someone wants to say, okay, great, I understand that flow, how does this make my life easier? Whose life is being made easier?
For me, working with the webhooks of GitHub, it would be it will make my life easier.
And it makes your life easier because why? Because you're able to automate these things now?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Because think about how you do webhooks today. Because that's a webhook event delivery is one of those big use cases where we're sitting in the middle of, whether we want it or not. The way how you do this today is you walk up to whoever provides webhooks and you land on an HTML page where they explain to you how that all works. And there's no good formal way of discovering these things. I mean, yes, there's open API, but we have all convinced ourselves that having cloud event is useful because it constrains what the event is. Mm-hmm. So having a way to create a catalog of all the possible event sources, and then walking up to that catalog and finding out what everybody's offering you, that seems useful.
Okay.
Rather than going on everybody's HTML page.
Okay, that's consistent with what I was thinking. Are there other? I'm sorry, Ryan, your hand's up.
Yeah, I think adding on to that, or maybe another way of thinking about that is one of the biggest challenges we hear at Twilio from our customers and also internally is just one of the biggest problems is just access to information that is valuable, and so by making that easier, there's a lot of value in just making it easier to discover and making it easier to just get information without having to interrogate different systems that that you might not know about in the first place.
Okay. And I mean, obviously this all then relates to people could supposedly write tooling, nice UIs and stuff like that, and do magic under the covers. That's always been my assumption. But I guess part of the reason I want to do this was a couple reasons. One is I wanted to see if there are other killer use cases that you guys have in mind that that we need to sort of talk about as we explain why we're doing this piece of work. And then second, I'm hoping to build out from this to turn this into a primer, to like we did for cloud events, to help explain why we're doing this and how people are expected to use it. So okay, this is a great first step for me. So are there other killer use cases that I should be thinking about in terms of writing down from a documentation point of view that you guys can think of?
I think maybe one that is in the subscription spec but isn't in the example is filtering as well.
Filtering, got it. Okay. Yep. Yeah, I just only had like 10 minutes last night to do this, but yeah, I was going to add more complex stuff, but filtering, yes, obviously. That's good. Anything else? Okay, I'll then continue sort of fleshing this out, and when I feel like it's beefier, I'll submit a pull request. That way other people can contribute to it, and we can let it grow. Okay. I think that's it in terms of the agenda. Are there other topics you guys would like to talk about? Okay, in that case, last call for the agenda. Austin, are you there? What about Nick?
Yeah, hi Doug.
Hello, and the other Doug. Doug, you there? Okay, what about Austin?
Here.
Oh, gotcha, Doug. Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, in that case, I think maybe Austin's up to wait for a sec. So that's it for this call. Everybody's free to leave if they want. We will start up the SDK call in just a couple of minutes. As I said, I don't think we have any topics yet, but we shall see if people come up with stuff. Otherwise, it'll be a very short call.
Yeah,
Right?
it will be a very short call. I also have to depart now.
Okay, thank you, Clemens.
So John Skeet from Google and I were talking about the C# SDK, and John doing some significant contributions, which I'm very happy about. So we're talking amongst ourselves with some changes, and once we've settled on the list of things that we want to do, then we'll tell you about them. But it's a discussion as this were just going on. So just nothing to report, and nothing that would be of grand interest at this point, because there's a lot of project cleanup that needs to be done. So we'll do that first.
Yeah, but more activity is always good. That's cool.
Yes. So sorry that I have to dash.
No, no problem. Have a good day.
Thank you. You too.
Let's see, Austin ping me. All right, so let's give everybody maybe, it's 55 right now on my clock. Let's wait till 57. We'll just turn 56. Let's give everybody another minute or so in case you need to hit the facility or something like that, and then we'll start up in a few minutes. So while we're waiting, Austin Bennett was on the call, then he had to leave, and I got him on the attendee list. Does anybody happen to know what company he might be with? Okay, thanks. All right. All right, why don't we go ahead and get started? Anybody have any topics? Nothing?
It's going to be a short one.
I know, that's what I'm thinking. Jem, go ahead.
Yes, I mean, I raised a lot of questions, I think, in the Slack channel. I think that was last week, because I was trying to understand how I could sort of verify my protobuf work in the context of an SDK. And I think I've not been involved in the SDK work, so I'm very much coming in as a bit of an outsider, but I wasn't entirely sure where to start. So it looked like, and I'm particularly talking about Java here, because that's really my bent. It looked like the Java SDK was in the process of going through a change in structure and so on. So it wasn't immediately clear to me, where I would need to do stuff, what the patterns were for, oh, you want to write a new format, or, oh, you need to support a new transport. And that's not a criticism, because I'm sure the guys that are working on this have a sort of shared understanding of where the stuff is going. But I couldn't immediately sort of latch on to something, when I looked at the Git repo. So that is just an observation. And I know I had other commentary around how, and I know there are to-do comments in there as well around this, is how to support, non-byte stream data types. And I was also curious if the group had any thoughts about a reactive style model for the SDK, which sort of resonated with me a bit more in my head in the earlier call as we were talking about streaming. So I think some of those, there's an argument to say that the API, there could be a value in having a more stream-centric SDK. So again, not criticisms, it's just it wasn't clear to me, where I should go.
Slinky?
Yeah, so first, thank you for your questions. So there are a lot of questions here. So first, to implement an event format, I can guide you through. It's quite simple and it's not going to change. So the API is already there and you can already start playing with it. So that's about the protobuf work. There is the documentation to do that is still missing, and I'm working on it. So just need to be a little bit patient on this. But again, just ping me and I can help you with the protobuf work. About reactive streams, so I initially thought about it because I'm a reactive stream guy, I would say, but the problem with reactive streams is that the interfaces are so much different between the several vendors that it's just complex to say, okay, let's use, for example, the one that are in the SDK, in the JDK, the reactive streams, right? Not everybody's using that. Or about byte buffers, for example, what byte buffers should we use? Should we use the one from the Java Neo, or should we use the one from Netty? So it's really a complex discussion, in my opinion. So that for now, I just decided to stick with a simple solution. So a byte array that just works. And if you have a solution that can put all people together, I'll be happy to discuss about that. But again, it's when you start putting reactive discussion, it's complex to put all the parties together, all the vendors together.
Yeah, no, I get that. Thank you very much. And that's
why there is a to do.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, no, that's brilliant. I think as our guys have not looked at the SDK a lot, to be honest. I think that's probably because when they started to look at this, the SDK wasn't, was pretty, was still sort of incubating. I think the problem I'm going to face, and I think I mentioned this in the chat, is that our frameworks guys are very opinionated on how comms works under the covers. So how we can plug in different HTTP clients or different low-level implementations without creating dependency hell is certainly a prime concern for us. But.
So if you need to implement just and that's one of the other problems. If we start thinking with reactive types, then we need to start thinking about having interfaces for each reactive type. So a lot of modules and so on. And that starts to be really complex to manage.
Yeah, no, I
while
get that.
now you just need Cloud Event Score. And if you need to implement a protocol binding for your own HTTP library, you just take the Cloud Event Score. There are some base classes. You extend those classes and you have done. Cool. So there is no documentation, and the APIs are still not the definitive ones. So please try and give some feedback about that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other topics, questions, comments? Going once? All right, I think we're done then. Short call. All right, thank you, everybody. We'll talk again next time.
See you.
Okay, bye.
Yeah, right.
Bye.
Thanks, bye.